Hello, everyone. A warm welcome from IERG. I don't know where in the world you are today. It's a good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Great to have you on our monthly webinar as usual. Today, we're going to talk a little bit as an extension of our previous discussion on GDPR and privacy law. Now we're going to look at a more practical implication of that, and specifically how data drive and how that drives insight and supports engagement, and how we overcome the challenges of this new privacy regulations and embracing the martech stack. Let's first go into some housekeeping. I will introduce our speaker in a short while. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time today, IERG stands for International Executive Resources Group. It's a global professional networking organization for senior business executives who have held significant leadership roles outside of their home countries, and of course for corporate sponsors seeking to promote their businesses and wishing to develop their leadership. We are so proud of being thought leaders, and our goal is to share knowledge, best practices, resources, contacts, global market perspectives, doing business in different markets, and really support each other's businesses and careers. For those of you who are not yet a member, please feel free to look at our website, and we have all the information there that you need regarding individual or corporate sponsorship. So please do visit our website for that. Some important notices. Few days to go until our inaugural Global Growth and Trend Symposium, which will take place in Midtown Manhattan. It's a huge event. We have the most prestigious lineup of business people and thought leaders on there. A great lineup. The team has done a remarkable job to put this together. The venue is absolutely awesome. It's in the offices of White & Williams with an awesome view, so you will really enjoy it. For those of you who may not have registered yet, please do so. Few seats left only. Do reach out to your buddies. This is probably the event that you want to attend in Manhattan in October. Honestly, have a look at our website. The link is on your screen. A wonderful panel that we've put together, and we very much look forward to having you there as well. There are obviously a number of chapter events coming up, the usual ones in Chicago, New York, Boston, wherever. Please, for our members, look at the events as they are updated on our website under the calendar tab. Special word, of course, of thanks to our corporate sponsors who are continuously supporting us. Health Focus, Art Buckland, Arcs Equity, Micro Larry, and Landing Board Seats, CR Worldwide, Stratcon Global, White & Williams, and of course, BDO. We are extremely happy and delighted to present to you today Mr. Robert Howells. Robert is British born, so it's great to have another co-European on the webinar today. Robert's lived and worked in Australia and the United States, now based in New Jersey. He runs his own marketing consultancy and is a specialist on global market entry, which of course is of interest to our membership, and account-based marketing and all things data related. He's a member of the board of advisors of Quantum Growth Labs, which provides solutions for privacy compliance. Also consultant for the Aberdeen Group, a leading market intelligence company. Robert's a former chair of the Direct and Digital Marketing Association's Global Advisory Board, and was an executive at leading marketing services company Hart Hanks, where he ran the international operations spanning 8 countries. He's a regular contributor to the Global Marketing Alliance and the Data Protection Network. Robert, mouthful, it's wonderful to have someone like you here today. When we spoke about GDPR previously, it's a hornet's nest. And now it's not just GDPR, it's California, Middle East, many countries are doing this. And the one thing that's really tough is marketing in this specific environment. I get all the stuff on my computer screen each and every day from newsletters that I had and websites I visit. So sure, it must be a nightmare for everyone out there doing marketing and technology. So we are so happy that you're spending an hour with us today and talking us through this, using data in today's world. So Robert, without any further ado, over to you. And one word of housekeeping to everyone listening. Please feel free to send us your questions. There's a chat box on the control panel. We will collect these during the webinar, and then, of course, we will cover these at the end of the process. So, Robert, over to you, sir.
Thanks very much indeed, Jack, and it's great to be with you for such a wonderful organization. So looking forward to really, well, I hope by the end of today's session, you'll have learn at least one of two things. Many of you I know are pretty accomplished digital marketers yourselves, and I hope you'll at least have the satisfaction of either confirming your views or having some ammunition to disagree with them. For those of you with more general backgrounds and information, what I hope to do is to show you, to give you the questions that you should ask about your marketing teams to make sure that they're well on the path to understanding not only privacy compliance, but where we are today in digital marketing, and most important of all, how that's enabling the consumer, the customer, to be empowered. Hopefully you can all see my screen. And
yeah, Robert, just put yours in presentation mode, so then we can have the full screen.
It now?
Nope.
Okay, let me just double.
Okay, what you should do on the start from, click on from beginning. Right there.
Okay, can you see the screen now? And then to this.
There you go.
Okay,
there
very
you
good.
are.
Okay, apologies about that. So what we'll cover today is what do we mean by data, the evolution of data and its usage in global marketing, and how gradually the privacy and consumer empowerment, or as the information commissioners around Europe call them, the data subjects, have evolved in their views about privacy. And of course, that's a continually evolving picture. The context of today, the opportunities and threats, technology and key assets. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, I hope that you'll at least come out of today with an understanding of some of the tools that you or your colleagues should be using and how to deploy them. Then we'll look at privacy, and not only the regulations around privacy, but also how the major organizations are actually interpreting the law. And it's going to be all the different laws, which now range really across the globe in different formats, and have now reached the United States, of course, with the new law in California. And then I'm going to give you a short case study on how data is being used, and then finish with some key takeaways. First of all, it's probably helpful to show what we actually mean by data. And it's worth looking at it in two different ways. Firstly, what marketers want to know, how data will help them market their audience, or total addressable market, known by the wonderful acronym of TAM, essentially how big their market is, who is likely to buy, and how big that market is, who those people are, what people do, what they buy, where they buy. And I've highlighted in red three key components, which are these days really important. So the earlier parts of it, experienced marketers will kind of take as read by now, but how they buy, how often they buy, and when they will buy next are key components of all the predictive models that the marketers are spending so much money on. And then obviously linked to that are their interests and their media consumption, both online and offline, income and behavior, because behavior is beginning to trump demographics and firmographics in terms of how marketers reach people. So what marketers want to know should match the sort of data that they're trying to get to. So that's demographic, which is where people live, their age ranges, their income brackets, whether they have families, and all those types of things. In the B2B world, we call that firmographics, which is their equivalent of how big their businesses are, how long they've been in business, what they actually do, their standard industrial classification, if you like. And that can go much deeper than that. I mean, the Aberdeen database has a list of of all the technology that's installed in different company sites. So that's firmographic data. The purchasing history, which you'll obtain clearly from your customer records, location and preference, online and offline activity, recency, how often they engage with you, financial data, SPI, which stands for sensitive personal information, which tends to be religion, politics, sexual orientation, and so on, and has to be treated very much in a very different category. And all those combine with obtaining those kind of one by one is not that hard, but putting them together in what we call a 360-degree customer view, or another acronym, SSOT, which stands for single source of truth, is much, much harder, particularly in today's world of big data, which Gartner defines as the three V's: volume, velocity, and variety. So that's what we mean by data, and there's a lot more to it, but those, I think, are the major basics. So let's look quickly at the evolution of data marketing, or data-driven marketing. And it really began in the 70s, and the pioneers were publishers, catalogers, credit cards, which I think started in the late 60s, non-profits, and of course politicians. And it was then really called direct marketing. It was a way of reaching individuals one-on-one directly, with some degree of segmentation. Today, as we'll see, it's kind of far transcended that, and it's not just one-to-one marketing. It's a much more cohesive and comprehensive way of looking at how brands engage with marketers. But in those early days, relational databases were coming into play. That's where you could, instead of just sending to a list of people, you could select on certain key requirements like location and other attributes that you had. And you could combine those demographics with RFM, recency, frequency, and monetary value. But otherwise, segmentation was still fairly limited. The concept of the 360-degree view was coming into play, but really without a lot of the tools and technology being able to deliver it. Direct mail was the primary. In fact, you could, apart from telemarketing, was perhaps the only medium. Storage was on mainframes with limited access. So in those days, which I kind of remember, you had to put in separate list requests every time you wanted to access data, and then it would go down to IT, and a day or two later, if not more, the data would actually arrive. Marketing messages were personalized, but not differentiated very much. So in other words, you could address a direct mail piece to Dear Robert with some degree of personalization beyond that, but the messages weren't really differentiated. So you could look as though you were addressing an individual and paying care and attention to him or her, but the message would be very similar, whether they were a major customer or just a declared interest. The first EU privacy law was in 1982, but was sort of limited in scope, and frankly not much more than having to register the database and offering opt-out. And telemarketing was then largely uncontrolled. Now, going into the kind of next 2 decades, and clearly we're covering a lot of ground here, but there was a move from mainframes to PCs, which enabled marketers to review and process data easily. Loyalty programs ramped up, not just air miles, which preceded that, but it really went throughout retail and other customer classifications. The internet took off. E-commerce started. Amazon, I think, was founded in '95. Banner ads and search obviously became much more prevalent by brands, and that in turn drove what we now call inbound marketing, which was dragging people into you, because research shows that perhaps 60% of purchases are of consumers, either B2B or B2C, look at brands before the brands are even aware of it, and that applies to today as well. In the early 2000s, cheap email, where the costs were literally cents, replaced expensive direct mail. Obviously, of course, because you did without print, production costs, and most importantly of all, perhaps no postage. To some degree, that led to a degradation of testing and measurement, because things were so. If you were used to paying, I don't know, $200 1,000 to get into the mail, and now you were paying $20 1,000 to reach people, and certainly before the days where it got totally overused, you tended not to bother with any kind of measurement. You just knew that you could afford to hit people at a much greater level. 1995, the next EU data privacy laws took effect, and that for the first time really gave some degree of control to the consumer about their data. And so some of the things that you'll see in the GDPR were predated and go back to 1995. CRM tools took off. Many of you will remember Siebel, long since bought by Oracle, but that was really the kind of, it was certainly the kind of impact that Salesforce has today. And later on in these 2 decades, mobile and smartphones became prevalent, and social networks took off. I think Facebook was 2007. So direct marketing today, it's all part of digital transformation and big data. All companies, large and small, are looking to make much better use of the data that they have available. As Jan mentioned right at the beginning, we now have bewildering martech and adtech stacks, which we'll look at again in a moment. These 3 next things are really important, and any marketing department, almost of whatever size, should now be aware of of these. Firstly, the marketing automation tools. Eloqua and Marketo are the best known. Salesforce has some components of this as well, but there are Microsoft Dynamics is another one. So these are all tools that you use to be able to communicate with your customers and prospects on what's called the buyer's journey. And the buyer's journey is no longer a kind of straightforward funnel of interaction. So it's very definitely non-linear. So people go to search for a product online, they come back, they think about it, they discuss it with their spouse or partner or friends in the consumer setting. They probably even share with friends on social media. In the B2B context, that goes in and out of the decision-making cycle. So marketing automation tools and the engagement on online media has to be very carefully, on online tools have to be very carefully tracked, and to see when people actually visit your site and how you respond to that. And the use of omni-channel marketing, which is really combining all different sorts of online and offline marketing to deliver the same kind of customer experience, is absolutely key. Programmatic advertising is key to this. Again, much more targeted advertising than we've seen before. And you all know the stories about it's really hard to except on rare occasions, to attract a single audience to the TV as it was possible in even 10 or 15 years ago. That's with the millennials and the generations that follow, they will really be digital natives, and it's important to understand where they actually see and look at ads. Marketing automation enables you to align content and nurturing. Content's really the material that you feed to them. Customer experience is also becoming much more important as consumers are empowered, as they decide where they want to look at your ads. They have much more control in general. There are many more tools to look after your customers and nurture them and make sure their experience is right. But they will certainly compare the experience with your brand to that of other most recent ones that they've experienced. And there's also plenty that they can do about it on social media if they don't like the experience they're receiving. Artificial intelligence, from chatbots to advanced models. So hard to tell sometimes when you go on a site whether it's a real person there, and at what point that, or rather, whether it's a kind of robot that's answering your questions, and when that passes over to a real person, an AI will develop in that area, and certainly much more in advanced models. So that will really improve the possibility of and it has already improved the opportunities of testing, which can be done much more quickly than in the old days. And social listening at scale. So recent example, I have one of my clients wanted to not only take part of their customer base that reached their kind of segmented target audience, but to see what they were doing and talking about at the account level on Twitter and LinkedIn, and listen for particular keywords. And that drives not only in general intent data across accounts, so knowing what accounts are trying to do and what they're interested in, but also what individuals are actually talking about on a personal level. And of course, the Internet of Things, which time has not yet fully come, but certainly the data that's gathered there will be key to marketing success. Nevertheless, we're kind of in the midst of a lot of challenges, and a recent report from the Harvard Business Review indicates real gaps in the way that we actually look after our data. Less than 50% of an organization's structured data, that's the data that's kind of consolidated into supposedly usable form, like purchase data, for example, is actually used in marketing. And less than 1% of unstructured data, that's the data that's just kind of hanging out there and not really identified or used, but is available to companies, is actually used at all. And a key point for GDPR, more than 70% of the company employees have access to data that they shouldn't, and GDPR puts limits on that. And 80% of analysts' time, expensive people, is spent on data prep and getting data ready rather than proper insight. And Dun & Bradstreet's done some research that came out only last week that said 70% of CRM system data goes out of date every year. 18% of client data, this is obviously all B2B, is duplicated, and it's often even harder with consumer data. 91% of CRM data is incomplete. I'm surprised that actually even 9% of accounts in Salesforce across the whole universe are actually complete in every respect. So these are the kind of challenges and opportunities that we're looking at. What marketers have to worry about. One is data quality. Secondly is privacy, of course, and the output from privacy, and indeed why GDPR certainly was put into effect, was around customer expectations, customer ownership, and customer empowerment. GDPR is not supposed to be an end in itself and to enable just to make things difficult for companies, although it's understandable that we often think about that, particularly in view of the kind of fines that we're hearing about. But it's all about the power of the consumer. Fragmented media, need for skilled digital marketers, content that's appropriate and rich, insight through artificial intelligence in order to kind of speed up your ability to deal with big data. So that's why there's so much talk about artificial intelligence, which certainly we won't go through today, but it's important. And last but certainly not least is cybersecurity and data breaches. The information commissioners have said that they will treat most severely infringements around GDPR that will impact data breaches. So we spent a lot of time worrying about consumer consent and so on and so forth, but they really will take major notice to begin with of data breaches, as Facebook is already finding out. So what does this mean to companies? Firstly, the kind of rise of marketing operations functions. So marketing is moving from the kind of stereotypical creative group, both within agencies and within marketing teams, to a real focus on marketing operations. And that can mean anything from setting up campaigns to liaising with sales and IT. The alignment of marketing and IT. And in really big companies, you see, because of course they can't actually make that work, you see the rise of departments called marketing IT, which is where marketing have built their own IT departments in order to support them. That's been going on probably for 10 years or more, and it shows no sign of diminishing. Digital natives dominate marketing teams these days, and it's less true now as more and more training is available. But until fairly recently, there was a kind of age gap, and I hate to mention kind of age ranges, but those slightly older than millennials who did not grow up as digital natives, and more importantly, were trained in marketing techniques before the growth of the internet, really had to retrain themselves. There's a plethora of specialist agencies around digital marketing and niches of digital marketing, but the major players are also, you know, not only the big agency groups, but also the tech suppliers, as we'll see, provide a whole range of multiple tech options. Here's the key takeaway from this, though. Marketing budgets are geared now towards technology investment and away from creative media spend and agencies. So this is certainly something that you probably want to watch out for within your own organizations. Are you seeing this trend away from media and creative and often, frankly, teams and into technology investment? And if that's not happening, and you'll see shortly a kind of checklist, then that perhaps is a bit of a red flag in today's world. And finally, the rise of in-house agencies, because we're moving away from a focus, or rather media spend is different, and a lot of it is increasingly automated. Big companies, and Procter & Gamble is the biggest example of that. I think they can do it themselves. Ford, I think, announced recently that it was moving in the same direction, taking money out of their spend with big agencies. I only just showed this slide. Many of you will have seen it. It appears periodically in LinkedIn. This one, I think, is a couple of years old, and it's got even worse since then. And there's not only marketing technology landscapes, but ad tech and many other data landscapes as well. And it's just to show you the sort of plethora of players that are now appearing in this space. And so it really is easy for marketing teams to kind of get confused with what tools that they should use. So we'll try and dig into that. And this is my take, and others may agree or disagree on some of the key assets. And some of them are tools, some of the capabilities, some of them are a mixture of both. A data management platform, which is clearly the way in which you can store structured data and make available through other tools for use by marketing or sales, or indeed other purposes as well. Preference Center, which enables your customers, prospects, consumers, those that visit your website, indicate how they want to be contacted, dates of consent, and so on, so that you can respond to them and communicate with them in the right way. Marketing automation, we've talked about briefly. That's the way in which you can align content with nurturing in the buyer's journey and communicate through those tools. CRM is the way that your Salesforce is the best example in B2B, but there are many other tools around in which you can manage your accounts and the contacts within them. All the different business information tools that are available. Data visualization tools like Tableau, I can't recommend strongly enough. DSPs, which is an interaction with publishers and advertisers so that you can buy and make available the ads that are targeted to the consumers you want to reach. Content asset management, so that you can store and curate the right level of content. Social listening tools, and software. That matching software means the data that you can match. So if somebody comes into your website and they're an existing customer, but you can't tell that's an existing customer, you can send them out the wrong message or dilute the customer experience they're having because you can't actually recognize them. So it's key to be able to do that. And these lead into capabilities like predictive analytics and models. Again, these days increasingly driven by artificial intelligence. Lead nurturing for B2B, retargeting. So if somebody comes to your website or starts to buy something and then abandons, you can kind of retarget. Programmatic advertising, the 360-degree view, cybersecurity, addressable market data, e-commerce transactions, account-based marketing, and the content library. These are all key aspects of modern marketing and things that you should make sure that your marketing teams not only are able to do, because I'm sure they can, but have the right tools and empowerment to be able to do that. So privacy, again, that's something that's kind of wanted to be a real takeaway. It's not just privacy anymore, it's the rights of the individual and the customer. And not just Europe, although GDPR has taken a big step forward in that, in empowering the rights of the data subject. But Japan has their regulations are different, but they're as equally as rigorous as those for Europe. Hong Kong and China, they also have laws in place. Difficult to know how and when they're going to be enforced, but Australia, New Zealand, Brazil, Korea, I think it's still hard to actually take data out of South Korea. So if you're running global teams, you need to make sure that your teams everywhere are aware of all these. And this is giving rise to a global data privacy view. So many big multinationals are now saying, well, I want to put in place standards of practice that are common across all the countries where we do business. And clearly that will lend towards the more conservative view rather than a more lenient view. So because there has to be the kind of highest common denominator, if you like. And California now has a law governing access and control. It can be regarded as sort of GDPR light. I'm not aware at the moment of what the fines are likely to be, but it does give consumers the right to know and understand and access the data that they have about an individual. I should also mention in Europe and Canada, there are also separate laws governing how you contact individuals through digital means. And in Europe, it's called they're still country by country, and they vary in severity or restrictions. The UK and France are less restrictive than Germany and the Netherlands, for example. But you have to be aware of those for email and other forms of digital marketing. In a moment, we'll look at how some of the big companies are reacting to that. So getting it right, how top businesses are working on this. So they're focusing very much on data quality. They understand that as more and more visitors engage with them, and the rise of what we might call inbound marketing, where people come to you rather than reach out because of privacy restrictions, data quality and being able to recognize people is really important. Data integration, because GDPR means that you have to know and understand exactly where all your data comes from, how it works with each other. And there's no point if your data marketing platform is GDPR compliant, but your instance of Salesforce is not. So you've got to make sure that the data all talks to itself and you understand the process flows. Standalone and highly qualified analytics and BI teams, investment in technology, testing in retesting of models, and the embracing of AI and machine learning integration is really key to what's happening here. And engagement, you have to track behavior. You have to link behavior to journey stages. So again, your models will be able to help you do this, and that's based on the thousands of interactions that large companies have. They know that if X does this, then they're likely to do that at the next stages, and so you can gear specific content to them. You need to add appropriate content, and increasingly the focus is on video. You need to have a consistent look and feel across all your channels, including web, landing pages, and social. If they look discordant in any way or simply just not the same, then that will impact your brand adversely. It won't have the same recognition. And that includes the look and feel that you have in search as well. And that's your understanding of what works in search and the keywords that work should inform your content and your other planning. And then finally, to focus on post-sales experience. Let me just do a quick kind of, it's not really a case study, it's a sort of vignette of how one of my clients that I worked with at my last company is embracing and using this. It's the commercial fuels division of Shell, which has a global scope. But while this program is B2B, because the target market are individuals working for commercial fleets, it's not as simple as, no B2B is simple, but it's not as, it's different, let me say, from let's say a technology company, because global means individual countries for Shell. So they could have, what I didn't realize until I started working for them was that companies like Shell and Exxon and BP and Total and all the rest, they kind of buy and sell partly because of regulation. In our own area in New Jersey, for instance, when Exxon and Mobil merged, they had to, they couldn't keep all their gas stations. So Lukoil, which is a Russian company, took them over. So it's a kind of very disparate picture. So Shell, for instance, I think operate in Norway and Finland, but not in Sweden. They also have lots of different cards aimed at different fleet size. And they have sometimes very kind of discrete differences between those. And there are major country by country differences in price, profit, competition, and distribution. So what stuck in my mind, I remember, was that the profit per litre of gas in Hong Kong was about 20 cents. And in Malaysia, it's about 2 cents. So even for fairly small markets, you have to do very, very different models to know what your ROI is on acquisition and retention. And the marketing strategy was fourfold: acquire new customers, engage with drivers, because any company could easily sign up for the car, but what really mattered was the extent in which the drivers themselves used it. So we had to work on increasing share of wallet, not only within accounts, but also with individuals. And then importantly, predict drop-off. So when a particular driver stopped using the car, we had to predict when they were likely to drop off completely and try and re-engage them. So this is a fairly good example of how the right data, predictive analytics, engaging step by step with the drivers and the accounts that work for them to increase loyalty card usage through predictive models and segmentation was really very effective in very different ways. And I think it's a very good example of how the devil is in the details, and straightforward segmentation would not have helped in acquisition or indeed in retention. So 5 key takeaways. Everything really begins with the right digital strategy. So your data strategy should really evolve from your digital strategy and not vice versa. It's easy to spend an awful lot of money working on data that may not be the right data. Focus on metrics and testing, and those these days can be tested very, very much at scale. You can test all sorts of different things very, very quickly, both inbound and outbound marketing. Not only choose your technology stack carefully, but ruthlessly discard legacy systems. You go to any big company and they've got a lot of junk lying about, and big companies being big companies, and even sometimes small companies being small companies, and individuals being individuals, they continue to work with tools in which they're comfortable. So you have to make sure that everybody's using the same system and the same tool, and you're not wasting time or money on older systems. Don't skimp on resources to ensure the right data quality, which is the foundation of your data strategy. And if you look after and measure customer experience, the results should follow. So thank you. Let's. I think I'm more or less on the right time, Jacques. So hopefully we've got some questions.
Thank you, Rob. Very, very insightful. I mean, it's a maze out there, and you're right. I mean, as you rightfully pointed out, the marketing has changed profoundly since the days of servers, and now we're in sort of mobile servers in our hands. A question for you, please, Robert. So how technology? You talk about technology, and that means you need data, right?
Yes.
So how are different companies responding from a marketing point of view? How are they responding with this new privacy law? So, for example, part two of the question: have you seen big, small, large, medium-sized companies perhaps moving their marketing database or the CRM hub to geographies where perhaps the privacy law enforcement is perhaps a little bit less stringent?
That doesn't really, I haven't seen a lot of that, to be honest. I think for a couple of reasons. The main one, of course, is that the GDPR does not apply to where the data is actually held. It's who the data, what data is held. And if it's a data subject is a citizen or resident of the European Union, then GDPR applies wherever in the world that data is held. And that was a common misconception in the early days of GDPR. So moving it around and trying to kind of hide it is not only useless, but it's probably a red flag, and certainly it would be a red flag for major organizations. What's important is to make sure that you look closely at the basis on which you are holding that data and take those right decisions. And there are 6, I know you had a GDPR session before, and if it was, I'm sure it was covered then, there are 6 actual bases for storing and holding data under GDPR, including the ones that are most crucial for the ability to fulfill a contract, for example, a legal requirement, but also consent and also legitimate interest. So if you go through various tests which are can be audited to justify legitimate interest, saying these are the business reasons in which I store this data, then that can be acceptable, provided you offer, you make that clear on your privacy policy, and you give the individuals notice and choice. So you could say, Jacques, it's in my legitimate interest to hold data about you for the following reasons, but I'm telling you this, and you have the opportunity to opt out. And if you want full details about how we're going to use that data, here's a link to our privacy policy. Now, for most organizations, many organizations, by the way, are using more than one of those 6 justifications to support their data. So some, for instance, are saying, okay, for my customers, those that have actually reached out to me, I can have legitimate interest because I know that they are interested in what I'm doing. And but for prospects, I'm not sure really that I can prove that, so I'm going to use consent, and I will try and get them to consent. And kind of addressing the first component of that, many companies in the kind of lead up to the GDPR insisted on sending around lots and lots of emails to people on their database saying, you have to consent, otherwise I'm exaggerating a bit, but not much. I'm never going to be able to talk to you again, which is A, ridiculous, and B, not in accordance with the intention of the law, and B, obviously self-defeating, because as you can imagine, in the month leading up to GDPR, people have multiple emails from their retailers, companies they bought online for, the local utility companies, asking them to opt in. Of course, they never did. The re-engagement rates from all this was kind of 10% in many cases. And companies that try to do that and base their justification on consent are now seeing major degradations of their database. So they're going to have to, they're rethinking that.
Right. Now, we have a question here from someone running sort of a smaller company. Yeah, I remember many years ago, I don't want to show my age, but going to the post office to do something small, and there's the 2-3 guys in front of you with this stack of envelopes that they need to mail. So clearly, this is their marketing campaign going out, right?
Yes.
You mentioned, technology and artificial intelligence, business intelligence, all big buzzwords. All of that sounds like big bucks as well, right? So it kind of seems to me this is becoming an uneven playing field for companies who need marketing. So you've got the Procter and Gamble's and the Shells, and they can spend millions and billions on the biggest technology to do the kind of big data analysis and send stuff out, and they have big databases that they can do data mining, and et cetera, et cetera. Now you've got small company, the Robert Howell's Close Corporation or Jacques Diaver, limited company, and obviously I need to sell a product. What advice can you give to a smaller company what can they do? So how can they best approach it, and how much money do they need to spend? So what is the best approach in this kind of world of big data and computer servers and artificial intelligence and computer power? What advice would you give to a smaller company who needs to do marketing and they just can't afford it and they have a small budget, startup?
So that's a really good question, and I agree that one of the unintended consequences of GDPR, I assume that the consequences are unintended, is that it can adversely affect small companies at both ends of the scale, both marketing suppliers and marketers. So, for instance, the one that's most likely to benefit from this to a degree is as more and more companies want to attract companies to reach out to them is Google AdWords, because small companies will be using that as a way to, which doesn't affect GDPR because you're just putting the data out there, and that's Google's responsibility. The good news probably is that for small marketers, you're so much below the kind of radar of the information commissioners that I don't think there's any, you're not suddenly going to have a huge fine unless you do something kind of really outrageous. But the advice I would give is to look, and the advice depends, frankly, a little bit according to where you are. So the first thing to do is to look at your basis of your GDPR compliance and the extent in which you can justify legitimate interest and or evaluate the amount of consent that you may have in your existing database. So that's the first thing to do, is to look at that and take a sensible business decision on that. Then once you're over that kind of hurdle, you can then say, well, how much are you going to communicate with the people on my database? And that depends rather according to the size of your database and where you are, and whether you're marketing to individuals or to businesses. In so-called opt-out countries like the UK, France, and Scandinavia, it's absolutely fine still to send businesses to emails without getting them to opt in. In the opt-in countries, both for consumers and for businesses, you have to opt in specifically, and that's probably what's presenting a challenge. Again, the laws differ slightly, and it depends also very much on your kind of current method of communication. Direct mail is still fine, but clearly that's much more expensive. It's still okay in most countries to be able to call company switchboards. Again, that only applies to businesses. For opt-out countries, again, telemarketing consumers is okay, provided you follow the guidelines of the local telephone preference services. In general, however, you do have to put more emphasis on reaching out, on advertising when that's available through AdWords, through programmatic advertising, and so on. So it does present a difficult challenge for small businesses. And really, you have to look at a case-by-case basis and see what works best for you with your target market and and where your audience is. What I would certainly do very much is to focus on the content that you have available, on driving people to your website, on thought leadership paper, on using social media, particularly LinkedIn and Facebook, Twitter, all these other mechanisms that are available these days to try and drive business. And if possible, then to become, to make a happy medium of all that. The real impact is on email to opt-in countries. But frankly, that's been the case for the last 10 years. You haven't been able to email in Germany and without consent for many years.
I know Denmark, for example, was one specific case where, I mean, for many, many years now, you may not send unsolicited mail, or emails. And if you do, whether it's a phone call even, so this kind of cold calling thing that doesn't work in Denmark, so different countries in Europe have adopted this in different ways at different stages. We have one last question here for you, Robert. Do you have any statistics with regards to the efficiency of targeted marketing based on big budget spend, artificial intelligence, and BI, versus companies who just do this general blanket coverage, just send the world my information to everyone as fast as they can get? Do you have any statistics, if I interpret this to say, well, I've spent this money and I've built this huge big infrastructure and this has paid off better, versus the guy who's just doing the blanket social media strategy?
Yes, let me, before I go on to try and answer that, let me just confirm the point on digital communication. So GDPR is standard now across Europe. The privacy laws, which are called PECR, P-E-C-R, which stands for Privacy Electronic Communication Regulation, in the UK, they are due to be standardized at some time in the future, probably the end of next year or the after. So it's really important you should keep your eyes, everybody should keep their eyes open for that legislation. And at the moment, the various trade associations and marketing suppliers are lobbying for that to be as lenient as possible. So on the question of technology ROI, I don't have any figures off the top of my head on that, but it's a really important question, because big companies will be putting in clearly millions and millions and millions of dollars into all this. And the question is, well, if I buy Eloqua from Oracle, or whatever Oracle now calls Eloqua, or Marketo, then how am I going to justify the use of that? And it's not only the software, that's only the kind of tip of the iceberg. The rest of it really is the trained people that you need to be able to use it, and the complexity that it generally adds to advertising. So the best thing to do is to look at and ask your various technology vendors and your agencies for their latest. I can certainly dig some out if people reach out to me based on their individual circumstances, and some kind of templates that you can use to measure success. But clearly, over time, it has to be excuse me, measured not only in terms of direct results, but also in the customer experience, because everybody else is sending out targeted, segmented messages. and you're still sending out blanket messages, then it's the bar is simply much higher these days. So look at what your competitors are doing as well.
Right. Well, yeah, please. I mean, we would be grateful if you could share with us, and we could share with our audience and members some measurement tools that we could see, you know, how effective is this really. I know you've got stuff like Google out there, whatever, but if you have any specific ideas or tools that we could use to do this kind of measurements and analysis, that would be useful, and we can share that with our community.
Yes, absolutely. I'll dig out some of the best practices from the main vendors for sure.
Magic. Robert, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for spending an hour with us. Very, very informative. I mean, I'm not a marketer, and I know we struggle in our company with this question each and every day. So you really gave me a lot of food for thought. So rest assured, I'm going to go back to the marketing team tomorrow. We're going to start talking about some of this stuff. Robert, on behalf of IERG, thank you so much to every one of you dialing in today. Pleasure having you. Thanks for attending as usual. Just a reminder, October 25th, see you in Manhattan. It's going to be great events, and we very, very much look forward to having you there. Few seats left, so if you want to get in, be sure to sign up. Robert, thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone. Have yourselves a great rest of the day. Ruth, thank you very much. Cheers, Robert. Thanks so much.
Thanks.